my queen, LaTrice Ross. We're gonna get into this conversation about Bill Cosby. Actually, you wrote a piece today, Queen. I'm gonna let you kind of start it off and just give me some of your thoughts. As this, I titled this the same thing as the piece I just wrote. I just put that piece up I told you about, Bill Cosby, cultural icon or rapist. So I put that piece up I shared with you earlier, but you actually had a lot of thoughts earlier today. So I want you to kind of kick it off if you don't mind, and then we can share some of our conversations from earlier today as well. But yeah, just give them some of your thoughts from what you shared today, because people seem to be torn, and it's almost a sad situation in my opinion to see our community so torn. But unfortunately, it's nothing new when it comes to emotional, big issue items. We seem to be torn, and unfortunately, torn between gender lines, and that's something I know you and I wish we could kind of remove from our community, but I think there's maybe some fair thoughts on both sides of it. But I hope we can kind of talk about, to talk with some sense to see how we can kind of come together and look at this entire situation. But it's definitely not an easy one. So again, if you will, Queen, just kind of kick off some of the things that you wrote about today. If you're not a follower of LaTrice Ross, I recommend that you find her. Trice Ross is how you're on Facebook now. So find, you can spell it out or whatever, but find her, because I recommend that y'all read this piece that I want her to kind of share some of her thoughts from that piece, and I'll share mine as well.
This morning, I was listening, I was on my timeline and I was reading and listening to Facebook Lives. And there were so many people who were really just outraged at Bill Cosby being first convicted and now being sentenced to prison. And it started last night when I asked the question, so for the supporters, do you believe that he's not guilty or innocent? Because there's a difference. And a few people replied. Many of them were saying that they believe that he was not that he wasn't innocent, and that's what I believe. So my stance on it is this: I don't believe that he should have been convicted based on the evidence presented. However, I do not believe that he's innocent of the charges of the accusations. Um, and the reason why is because 60 accusations. Where there's smoke, there's fire. There's a deposition where he admitted to buying drugs for the purpose of, for indecent purposes, is what I'll say. And my problem with it is not that he's going to prison. I think he's right where he belongs. I don't really care that he's an 81-year-old blind man. He preyed upon women when he was younger, and now he's getting his just desserts. My issue is the precedent that it potentially sets for other men of color who may be accused of rape or sexual assault. Because there was not a large amount of evidence against him other than testimony, I think it sets a dangerous precedent for Black men going forward. So my stance is, if you want to be outraged about something, then you should be outraged about the inequities that exist in our society, and not about some predator who's finally getting what he deserves.
Right. You and I have been discussing this again all day. And so, and that was my concerns that I expressed with you, that I was very fearful of the precedent that possibly could be set by this trial. And when I say precedents, I'll even explain that to those listening, just from the standpoint of the idea of when you think about mass incarceration, and a lot of times I don't think the community is really aware of how prevalent injustice is within our justice system. I mean, we talk about it, we know that it happens, but I don't know that. Let's say I got a question here. Let's go ahead and look at the question too. It says, "Do you not believe his testimony should have been admitted as evidence?" Okay, we'll jump right into one of the questions. Let me read it, and I'll let you. It says, Kimberly Hartfield asks, "Do you not believe his testimony should have been admitted as evidence?" Let me explain that for those that may not have kept up with it. So what she's asking about is, in this recent trial, there was a disposition that was closed from a previous trial, I think 2013 actually, where he basically, it's kind of what you referred to, the disposition where he admits to buying Quaaludes in the past, for sex. And a lot of times, and that for a lot of people has turned into him admitting to rape. Just to even give that clarification real quick, he admitted to buying Quaaludes for sex, way back in the day. And what most of us don't know, because Quaaludes is not a drug that's still around, but in the 60s and 70s, Quaaludes is possibly similar to ecstasy. If you heard of that term in today's time, where people, it was a party drug. So people would take the drug, and sex and drugs, they go together. So what he admitted in the disposition was that, matter of fact, they asked him point blank to a certain extent, did you buy these Quaaludes with the purposes of having sex with young girls? Bill Cosby's answer was yes. And then the next question that he got asked, just to give all the clarification, was, did he ever give the drugs to someone unknowingly? And his lawyer stepped in the disposition and said he could not answer that. So that's just a fact. Just to clarify, he never necessarily admitted to rape. Again, that's just one fact. I'm not stating my side, just kind of stating the fact as is. So he never answered that question. Now, of course, throughout his lifetime in fighting these cases, let me see, you got one. Okay, I got Kimberly saying she believes he admitted much more, including that he didn't inform Constant, and I forgot her first name, but Constant is the woman that brought the accusation this time. Kimberly, in my research, I don't have information of him admitting more. I don't have any. You might have to and I did a lot of research, I will say. Go ahead.
Montoya, when Andrea Constand's mother spoke to him, she recorded a call, and he made some admissions during that phone conversation.
Even her statement is not admissions, but the
Well,
sorry is
right.
definitely, yeah. That's not. I mean, that's still different than admitting, because I'm just saying the sister's putting, and again, I'm not trying to defend Cosby. I'm just calling it for exactly what it is. She
Right.
said he admitted much more. Right now there is no admission of much more other than saying he was sorry for what happened to her mother. So that
Right.
is actually, just calling it for fact for what it is. Go ahead, though, Queen.
Absolutely. And I like to respond to Rio. You're right. There is a third accuser for Brett Kavanaugh. Um, and that's part of the problem. We should be outraged at the inequities that exist. That's what I'm saying. Those are the things that we should be upset about. In August, there was a doctor in Houston who heavily sedated a patient and raped her. He got 12 months probation. Now, this is a doctor who took an oath to do no harm. And here he is sedating a woman and then raping her. And he's been tried and convicted, and his sentence is 12 months probation. Now, that shows the disparity in sentencing for people of color versus white people. That is what I'm outraged about. I don't care how long Cosby sits in prison. He's a predator. However, simply because there are inequities that exist doesn't mean that we should absolve him of what he's done. What we should be fighting for, in my opinion, is to correct the inequities, to ensure that should another trial occur, such as what occurred with Cosby, that lack of evidence doesn't convict someone who may turn out to be innocent. Now, granted, we've been seeing cases being overturned, and there are not. We don't have the number of people who make false accusations are not great, but any false accusation against anyone is wrong and it shouldn't happen. But what we are in danger of now, because this person who had money, power, and influence, if he can be convicted and sentenced on such flimsy evidence, what does that mean for the average person who doesn't have the pockets that he has, who doesn't have the ability to pay high-priced attorneys like he did? What does that mean? And anyone who knows me know that I am the queen of gender equity. So to hear me saying this, some people are probably very surprised, but I am about what's right, regardless of gender. I believe he's not innocent, but I don't believe he should have been convicted based on what was presented in court. And because of that, we have to be concerned as a community of people that going forward, our young men may be subject to trials where they are going to be convicted based on flimsy evidence, and they may not be guilty because there wasn't anything but testimony.
Right. That's the risk, and I wrote, and go read my piece where I give more details on these facts. I got another question here. Diana Darris asked, "Are you proposing that all famous accused. This is she wrote this before you said this, what you just said, LaTrice. So you may have pretty much answered her, but I want to just address her very quickly. She just asked, "Are you proposing that all famous accused black men not be convicted due to past injustices?" I think she was responding to something I was saying, so I know you're not saying that. So I want to say to you, Diana, that just keep in mind that when I was just clarifying what the actual evidence or the facts were, I haven't even stated a position, which what LaTrice has just explained to you is actually something I've been saying to her all day, that I'm very fearful of the exact, when you look at the trial specifically. And so I'm not proposing that people not be convicted because of past injustices. I'm very sympathetic as a male to the idea of the fact that, and this is something that we want to go into tonight, is how and why a woman faced with rape or that type of trauma, I understand why it is quite difficult for a woman to come forward with that type of information. And when writing my piece today, that's kind of how I challenge the men from the standpoint of because this is not a, generally speaking, now obviously there are men who face molestation or have been raped. So I'm not acting like it does not happen for men, but generally speaking, we are privileged in the sense of not having to even consider that for the most part in our lifetime. I've never been in fear of being raped. Again, it doesn't prove it doesn't happen. But I make this point to kind of say this, that because of that, as men, we quite often will just use the logic of, well, if somebody burglarizes my house, I'm gonna tell. If somebody hits me physically, or does some type of damage or robs me or whatever the case may be, then I'm gonna quickly go to the police to get some type of recompense, thinking that, well, isn't that exactly how a woman should act after being raped, not realizing that it is a totally different type of trauma. I'll let you speak to that, LaTrice, as a woman, but I'm just saying that quite often as men, we fail to understand it's not the same, but not just the same because of the trauma, it's because of environments like right now. Like we don't have a perspective of that. It's the one type of point when you're victimized in that way, it's the one time where you got to prove that you not making it up. Like if I
Right.
get beat up by
And it's
somebody, I
not
don't
just
got to prove
men.
that to a certain extent. Go ahead.
Right. And it's not just men. I'm not going to let my sisters off the hook. I've seen so many women asking the question, why didn't they come forward sooner? And if you have never been sexually assaulted, then do the research on the mental trauma that it causes and the emotional things that a woman goes through or a person goes through when they've been sexually assaulted. Furthermore, research shows, particularly in the Black community, that we women in particular we will blame the victim for the assault more so than blaming the victimizer. And let's just bring it even closer to home. We will protect the family predator because we don't want to get him engaged in the legal system, and so we won't report him, but we will keep a watchful eye to ensure that he doesn't touch our children when that does not work. And so what happens is they're shamed, they're blamed for what happened to them, they are further victimized because of the comments such as we see on online over the last couple of days. Um, they don't feel that it's safe for them. They feel that their character is going to be ruined. And furthermore, just the mental stress and toil of having someone to violate you so intimately and take something that was not theirs to take, um, it affects that person for the rest of their lives. And so I've seen people say, well, he's an old blind man. These women are still dealing with the emotional turmoil of being assaulted by this man all these years later. And it took one person being courageous enough to finally come and speak up, and that set forth that domino effect where others felt courageous enough. It is such an egregious thing to question whether what took someone so long. It doesn't matter how long it took for them to come forward. I applaud anyone who's courageous enough to come forward and confront their victimizer to ensure that they get justice.
No, it makes sense. I don't, Kimberly, if you're still watching, I'm definitely open to more information. I don't know if there's a way for you to share maybe some specifics. But Kimberly Hartfield, who mentioned earlier, who typed up something earlier, she was saying that there's a lot more evidence in the disposition. I'm open to it again, just based on what I was able to find I'm definitely open to it. So if there's a, if you could present that, if there's a way that you could present the information, please, provide it as well. And so I want to even clarify again, because you've already kind of said that piece, LaTrice, that the idea of this particular trial, like what I've been looking for, and Kimberly, if you can bring me this information, what I've been looking for is that there, for example, circumstantial evidence, physical evidence, which obviously is a lot harder to do sometimes. I think this situation was almost 14 years ago or something to that effect, if I remember correctly. So I know that becomes difficult sometimes. But here are some specifics that a lot of people may not be aware of. But this was the second time this was going to trial. The last time it was, it resulted in a hung jury. They only allowed one additional testimony in, and this time the judge allowed five other testimonies in. And so, from what I have found, unfortunately, Kimberly, just to share with you again, I'm definitely researching. I'm not saying that it's not information not out there. I haven't been able to find it, but it looks like the information was mostly, the only difference was really those five testimonies, which unfortunately, if I'm at trial, I will say this: I would hope if I got a testimony, it's a testimony about the situation at hand. What they ended up doing, which was I guess maybe a smart move by the prosecution, they were saying we want to bring these other testimonies in to. Um, I, I think she said just Google. I definitely been Googling. I've been Googling for 2 days, so I haven't found it. So if you could, let me see if it tells me what to Google. Okay, got it. So anyway, let me finish what I. The only thing I was saying was that that the five testimonies were these women saying what had happened to them personally. And the prosecution wanted to establish a pattern of, hey, this is what he's done. Even one of those testimonies admitted that she took the Quaaludes voluntarily. That was, again, that's only one out of the five or whatever, which of course is what he's been saying the whole time. So again, when we talk about the justice system and what it means going forward for us as an African American community, and it it appears it appears that if it was only testimony, and this is what I wrote in my piece, this is still a scary aspect that I could go before a trial and a bunch of testimonies is what it takes to get me convicted.
Right.
In the situation with Constant, he said it was Benadryl. She said she don't remember what it was, but even she voluntarily took the pills, even for the incident we talked about. Again, I'm not saying this to say Cosby's off the hook. That's not here. I'm with LaTrice. I'm with that. If you study, we've done 2 shows on this in the past. So when we did the shows on it in the past, what I found was, here's what I actually believe, because there were women who didn't want no money. The women that have conflated the situation out of the 60s were those who kept the relationships. And so people kind of relied on those stories and applied it to all the women. But there are women in this situation who didn't want any money. And there's still women who have not come forward.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've seen any of those stories, the women have not come forward. It's kind of hard not to deny their scenario. They didn't want to be part of this circus still. When we
Right.
go back to what we were talking about in the beginning, how hard it is to come forward. There are actors who believe, who respect Cosby, but say they know victims of his that are not part of the 60 right now.
Right. So can I address Kabir?
Yes,
Um,
please do.
the whole NBC thing, Cosby made a comment and he researched putting together a consortium of individuals to help him to get the billions of dollars needed to purchase NBC. It was never a serious offer on the table because he never gathered the required amount of people who would be able to raise the money to purchase NBC. If you research and dig, really dig, you don't have to dig deep, you'll find that it was never a serious offer on the table for Cosby to purchase NBC. That's just something that we like to throw up because it sounds good. We read a sound bite and we are running with it. There is no validity to that. No one's stopping him from purchasing NBC other than the fact that he could not raise the necessary funds to do so.
Right. I know we still got Kimberly. Like I think are you Kimberly? Are you talking about the disposition that was allowed in? Like, I feel like I've read that one. So give me an example of what information was in there, in addition to him admitting to buying the Quaaludes for sex. Like this,
I'm reading
because you're
it right
saying,
now, and I'm reading it right now. So
right,
I'm at the part where he said he got, did you get another prescription for Quaaludes? He says, yes, this was in the 70s. He said, who are the people that you gave the Quaaludes to? And then Mr. O'Connor said, keep it to the Jane Doe. I'm not going beyond that. I'm instructing him not to answer it beyond the Jane Doe. Um, then when you got to the Quaaludes, was it in your mind that you were going to use the Quaaludes for young women that you want to have sex with? He said yes. Then follow-up question, did you ever give any of these young women the Quaaludes without their knowledge? His attorney stepped in and objected to the question and again restricted it to the Jane Doe. Um, um, and so he did not answer that.
right.
Um, he said, okay, so you're saying that you never gave the Quaaludes to anyone other than, and then it's just the letter T. His attorney again said, don't answer the question. You can ask all the questions you want about the Jane Doe. Um, then another question, sir, I want to explain to you, I'm asking you a question. You have every right in the world to say, no, you misunderstand me. And then the answer was, I just did. And then the question, your counsel cannot give you clues, as he is obviously trying to do that's inappropriate. And the attorney said he wasn't trying to give him clues. Um, Mr. O'Connor, are you going to instruct him to answer? And he says, you cannot tell him not to answer. So
Yeah,
there's
and
this
then just
back
to
and
jump
forth,
in real
back and
quick,
forth.
yeah, and just to
Right,
jump in real quick, because I read it not this time around. I read it when I did the show before, so I didn't know if
right.
you there's another. Because what happened is they stayed that way the rest of the way. So the only thing
Mm-hmm.
that was a major admission was the yes to the Quaaludes for sex. There
Right,
wasn't more in the desk because the lawyer kept doing that, and when they finally gave up, when they saw that the lawyer kept making it, he ain't gonna answer, he ain't gonna answer. So that's how the rest of the disposition
that's how
went.
it. I'm at
So
the end, and
yeah,
that's it.
right. So
It's
there's
the
nothing. I don't know what they could have used out of, again, but they admitted that the disposition was still damning because that's how people still receive the fact that he bought it for sex, that kind of
right.
thing. And let's clarify another thing, another myth out there. Here's a myth that people who are saying that Cosby is innocent or quite that are using it's the Jane Dickinson admission in her book. People that headline was misused constantly when that headline first came out. There's headlines that says Jane Dickinson admitted to lying under oath. Like that headline is out there. Um, um, Witness admits to lying. Like there's all kind of headlines that say
Right.
that admission was made. Let me just give again. I'm not. Keep in mind. I'm going to explain this fact. I am not saying how I feel about the fact. People really will hear the fact and say you're making an assumption. I'm just telling you the fact how it is. So there were a lot of people who thought that Jane Dickinson lied under oath. What actually happened, they used that as headlines just to get you to read the story. What actually happened in the courtroom was she they were asking about her interactions with Cosby, and she was saying that he had got on top of her and raped her, and she was so upset because this was America's dad or whatever. He had basically done it. She had made that allegation. The lawyer, the defense lawyer for Cosby, said to her, "Well, you didn't make any mention of this." I'm giving a paraphrase version. You didn't make any mention of this in your book, and it kind of caught her a little bit by surprise or whatever. And so what she said on the stand was that what she put in the book was a fabrication. What she was saying was because I think the editor or somebody else that was helping her with the book, either the publisher or the editor, she wanted to put the story, and it was like, if you put this in this book, it's not going to sell, and Cosby could end your career. So when she said it was a fabrication on the stand, she was saying the fabrication was leaving it out was her fabrication. But people took that term to say that she admitted that she had made up a story. And so the lawyer, pretty slick, says, "Oh, so you made up a story to get some money." That's a pretty smart move in the courtroom. But she came back from that response, doubled down, and says, "No, I'm on oath here in this courtroom. So on oath, he did this to me. I have creative license, and I wasn't under oath when I wrote my book. And so it was, basically saying it was better for me not to put it in my book so that it would sell." And again, it's not about whether I believe her or not, but the facts are she didn't admit to lying or fabricating the story on whether she was raped or not. But that's how the headlines have went out. And for those who are siding with Cosby, they are using that headline to say, oh, and I made that mistake too. You know what I mean? I made the mistake and said, because the headline literally says she admits to lying. And she admits to fabricating in her book, but that's not admitting to lying about Cosby. So like when I read the story, I stood corrected, which is your biggest thing, LaTrice, is that we don't run with headlines. That's why the NBC myth is out there. That's why, like I said, even in the disposition saying that he admitted more, I don't think that's the case from what I read. But I'm not saying that lets him off the hook. But you can't say he admitted to rape, which a lot of people would say. You can't say that James Dickinson admitted to lying. That's not the facts of the case. When you get the facts, it keeps you off of this leaning towards what you emotionally already believe. If the reality is what you've already said, LaTrice, it is dangerous in our minds as black men to face a jury without the means that a Bill Cosby had with a bunch of testimonial evidence. But we don't know for a fact that it's going to happen, but that is something that's fearful for us. Here's the bigger issue and why we're doing this live. The reason we're doing this live is, as men, if you understand that this case may not be the strongest case, and that type of injustice usually leads to bad things in our community. So if you can agree with that, here's the part that gets missed and why I want to do this live. I realize that there are a lot of sisters who have actually experienced the same scenario that we're talking about right now. And so as men, we never have to think about the facts of the situation from the standpoint of this has happened to me. And so even when I'm right now laying out the facts, not again, it may sound like I'm taking a side, I'm just laying the facts as they are. But I can understand for sisters who have experienced this. And the reality is we've had more sisters experience this than our community ever really wants to admit. So if you've actually been through that type of trauma, I can see a sister going, I'm not going to make that up. Why would people think 60 women would be making this up? This is not children that are being influenced. These are grown women who are saying, hey, I had an issue. And so when we're out here going, if we go as far as to say this man is innocent off what I call myths, not getting the actual facts, if we're out here saying without getting the facts, how do we look to our queens? What are they feeling? Go ahead, talk. I'm sorry, Queen.
And
Did I lose
let
you?
me address
Yeah.
something that someone said to me earlier today. Um, why did they go to the room? I don't know why they went. But if a woman doesn't explicitly say, yes, I want to be intimate with you, yes, it is okay for you to insert your genitalia into mine, then it's rape. If she says no, or if she is unconscious or incapacitated in such a manner where she can't give permission, then it's rape. It doesn't matter whether they willingly went to his room or not. They did not agree to have sex with him. That makes it rape.
Like, like when we pose those type of things to you as women, like I don't. It's like how oblivious can we be? But you're really just being extremely oblivious to having like I don't know what type of trauma we could even compare it to. Like as men, we don't experience somebody entering us and taking who we are, taking a piece of us. Like I've been abused in my I can say that I don't mind saying that I've been abused before, right? Like I can say that I've been abused, but not abused in that manner to the extent that I now have to have somebody try to explain to me what that's like who hasn't experienced it. And so I just think we do our sisters this huge injustice to look at it only from our aspect. And I do have this real life fear that we, in a sense, possibly lowered the standard for what it takes to get convicted. We already have had that long, sad history in this country as far as, black men being accused of rape and getting out with DNA tests. How many are not getting out? So So we
Right.
we know that there's a real life consequence. I am afraid that this case gives precedent for that to happen more. And so, but as men, we could stand right there alone and say, well, yeah, that's the issue, without realizing how that feels for our sisters. So how, like if I wanted to keep it right there alone, you've already said you see that as an issue, LaTrice. But if I wanted to say, well, that's what it's about, how does that feel for you as a woman?
It pains me to even have to say that I don't believe that the testimony, the evidence presented was would it should have found him not guilty. It pains me to no end to say that, because I honestly believe to the core of my very being that he's a predator who, for all of these decades, used his power and influence to prey on women and then threaten to ruin their careers, or if they did dare to speak out, he settled it out of court. So he's right where he belongs. But how it makes me feel as a woman, it makes me feel that I'm not safe. It makes me feel that if I were assaulted and I by someone who was famous or whatever, or even someone who was well known in my community, and if I went forward, would my community of people believe me? I don't think they would. Well, showed your cleavage, or you had on red lipstick, or you had on a short skirt, or you wore 5-inch heels. None of those are reasons for someone to take something that's so intimately personal that it's not theirs to take without permission. So it makes me feel unsafe as a woman. But as a mother of two boys, I'm also concerned about the precedent and the danger that it puts them in.
And so it's like that's the part what you just said is again why I want to even do this discussion, is because I do like the fact that you say you feel unprotected. Like
Right,
there are
Kenneth? Straight
right.
bullshit, right, Kenneth? Wow.
Well, what he just what happened? I
He,
didn't see that. Did I miss something?
Kenneth Alexander, he wrote Take Care, and then immediately after that, he wrote, I guess when I was talking, he wrote Straight Bullshit.
See, I don't even want to put you through
That's
this.
why.
Right.
That's
I don't
why.
even like this. I'm hurt to even know that we're on this broadcast for you to go through that. Like the only point that I was about to make right now is here you are as a black woman once again looking at all the facts and willing and basically are willing to say this is a bad precedence for our community. But yet you feel unprotected, and there are good brothers who who do stand up for sisters all the time, but they're unable to hear, it seems like, in my opinion, they're unable to hear your why you feel unprotected. And if we're unable to hear it, then it's all the more reason you're gonna feel unprotected. Like, oh, like if this sister's right now, LaTrice, you're willing, because I brought that to you when I was going so watching your back and forths earlier today. I saw you kind of linking up with your queens on social media, and y'all saying, "Man, I'm tired of men seeing this way and frustrated." And but you being a voice of reason, I knew I could say it to you, versus a lot of other people to say, Queen, you know I'm with you, but here's a precedent that I'm concerned about. And at that point, you was willing to kind of come out of that space with the ladies and say, all right, Montoya, what you saying to me? And I said, because the first thing you know, when you didn't know, it was like yesterday, you were like, well, I haven't seen the evidence yet. And I say, well, right now I'm researching, but I don't see much more than this testimony. So
And I
when
came
you
home and researched.
right, once you did it and saw the same thing, you're like, oh, this like you just said today, it pains me. Why can't I'm frustrated that as men, we're not just as pained by how all of this makes you feel. Like this man could say he getting off the live because he thinks what you just said is bullshit. Like what I'm like that. What is wrong with us? What is wrong that you can understand my pain, but we can't hear your pain? And if there's any, it's only a few people on the live. I hope people hear this later. Like, is it really a situation where I don't agree with each other and I just don't want to hear nothing you got to say? Because right now, brothers, I'm begging, I'm pleading. I look, I'm literally studying stats, looking at the legal system constantly, because I don't think our community places enough precedence, no, not precedent, but enough importance on how injustice, how much injustice is in our justice system. I don't. So I'm always looking at this. That's why this just trial scares the heck out of me. But my
And
butt is bigger than that. My butt is can we not understand that this, like LaTrice, you haven't been through this type of trauma from what you have never shared that with me from what I understand, but you're saying that if you were faced with it, you would be afraid to come out. Like, men, how can we not hear that we don't listen to that degree? That when we say, well, why did they take so long? That's why.
But you know what? It's no different than those who are against Kaepernick saying he's protesting against the flag instead of understanding that he's protesting against the injustices that are visited upon our black men by the police. It's no different. It's just that it's black men saying that wait, it's not valid because it's coming from me, not understanding that I reside at the intersection of race and gender. I'm black, but I'm a black woman. And there are times when I've asked people, so what do you want me to do? Give up my womanhood just so that I can be all black and not address women issues that are related to women? Every time I address a woman's only issue, I'm accused of being a feminist, and I'm not. I'm an ally for inequities for most people, against them. And to be called a feminist, I find insulting, because I don't fit that model. But I'm not allowed in my community to voice issues that relate only to me being a woman. I'm only allowed to address those issues that impact the community as a whole. And that's not fair to women because we have to navigate the world as black women. And that's two demographics that are marginalized.
Yeah, I'm gonna do two more things and we can cut this off.
Can you address Kabir about it's not
Okay.
about the what ifs? That's what we're talking about, the inequities. We're talking about those things. And Bill Maher, I believe, was accused of sexual harassment, not rape. There's a difference.
Yeah. So I think what it is, I think I'm missing some of the comments. So what was the last comment you? Yeah, I would love to address it. What
So
was the comment?
Kabir is what about the former host Bill O'Reilly, who for decades has been sexually assaulting his
Okay.
coworkers?
Oh, that's a fair. Here we go. So this is how we're gonna handle that. So this is a thing that I was asking LaTrice earlier today. So because I asked LaTrice, I said, well, why? Well, I said, why are you upset when people are making those type of comparisons? But you remember when we had that conversation, I was saying it because I was already, because I study this world all the time, so I was already to the extent of the dangers of what it means for black men going forward. And what you shared with me was, you're like, no, these people are acting as if, well, since they didn't get it convicted, Bill Cosby shouldn't be convicted, and that devastated me. That devastates me. So to address you specifically, LaTrice, she's already addressed. She knows we already know the inequities are there. The inequities are there to the extent that some of them should be in prison as well. So the mistake we should not make is because some of these other people should be in prison, we should not now say, well, Cosby should be out. Like, to do that plays. Let me see. I got somebody that says Cosby never used. Let me see if I can see it. Okay, yeah. But yeah. So at best, black men, if your whole focus is the precedent that this is set and the racial inequity that we know is already part of the system, if we feel like the stakes got higher, if we feel like the target on us has gotten bigger, we got a sister that's saying she's willing to hear that much. But I will say to you, Kabir, that if your presentation is, what about these other men that got away with it? Like, that ain't a space that we need to be on or be in if we say we want to also take care of our women. If we're listening to our women say they are afraid to come out because they're going to be blamed, then can we at least get it right? The right is we don't like the racial But here's the other part, that even for those of us who understand the racial inequity, and that is our focus, that we're not out here saying that, well, Bill Cosby should be out for these men, it didn't happen for these men. So for those of us who get out of that space, we don't need to be in that space at all. But for those of us who get out of that space, here's something else that we will quite often ask of our women. Once they agree that we see the issue with racial inequity, we ask them to stop right there. Like, we literally say, ride with us, sister. And then we don't take the time to listen to how we could step up and protect them so that they're not in the scenario. Like, the better conversation we should be having, now that we have this huge case that gives all of this dialogue, the better conversation we should be having is, how do we make it more comfortable for people who have actually been victimized to come forward? Like, that's a better conversation, because we do pile our dirty laundry in our community. So that applies to rape victims, that provides to sexual molestation. Like, there's a lot of things, the way we handle it and talk about it, that makes it uncomfortable for us to even protect our own children. We don't make it comfortable for them to come out. And that stays with our women if they were hurt when they were young. They couldn't come out then. So what are the
Montoya,
suggestions for coming out now? Go ahead.
nearly, there was one report that I read a couple of years ago that said nearly 70% of Black women, by the time they reach the age of 18, have had at least one sexual coercive experience. And that means it could have been someone pressuring them, something as small, and when I say small, it's not small, pressuring them to have sex, to nearly 70% of Black women by the time they reach the age of 18. That meant that happened between birth and 18. Children, 70% have had a sexual coercive experience. And this is typically these ages, they're around family and family friends. So even at home, we're not protecting. So we're in this big old uproar about Cosby and him, raping these women. But let's bring it closer to home. We're not protecting our children.
All right. Let's talk about what you just that stat, because there is nuance to it. And as I'm fighting, and carrying the flag, saying, men, we got to make a better conversation out here. What I will say, that stat doesn't surprise me. And to a certain extent, what's included in that stat, and it's just calling it for what it is, and people probably may hear this wrong, but what's included in this stat is the natural aspect of a man saying, hey, I want to, have sex with you or whatever. So clearly,
that's why I made a point of saying that.
Right, yeah.
That's why I made a point of saying that, is from the pressure of, come on, baby, let me, if you love me, you will, down to pinning somebody down and taking something to you.
Right. And so, so there's an aspect of that is relatively natural. We're, to a certain, I'm just, at least in my opinion, there's an aspect of that is relatively natural. Here's something that I would want to bring to the table. And it's just something that it's just how to improve the environment. So what I think happens for us as men is the Me Too movement, to a certain extent, has heightened things, and I would even offer to say exaggerated some situations, to the extent that when I say we're worried about how we're going to be seen in the justice system, I think it keeps kind of teetering on that edge to where it's easier for a brother to become a victim of the justice system. I think that agenda exists. As much as I'm saying I want to protect women, I think the part that men latch on to is the part of it that feels like it's after us. And I think it keeps men from seeing past it, to have a better dialogue of listening to what y'all really go through. I'm just trying to tell you what I think the psychology is that's going on when you're trying to say, hey, sister, man, brother, I don't feel protected. I think men are kind of holding on to. Some of this seems superficial. They
Hmm.
hold on to the extent that they won't listen to anything you have to say.
I
And I
don't
don't know
disagree
how
with
to
that.
have that conversation.
Yeah, and I agree with that, but you know, it's like where do you find that balance? So there are two incidences that stand out in my life that that probably have caused me to be so passionate about gender equity and gender issues. When I was a young girl, about 7 or 8, my uncle in my hometown took me to the barbershop with him where he hung out on Saturdays. And there was a man there who was my uncle's age who exposed himself to me. I didn't know what he did. I didn't tell my uncle. I just knew I didn't like it. Um, and to this day, my uncle's dead now. I never told him, but I was 7 or 8 and he exposed himself to me. And I never went into that barbershop again. I never even went onto that street again. Um, Maybe a few years ago, I was at South DeKalb Mall and I was alone. And I went there specifically for something that I could only find there. And I was walking in the mall, and you know, two men were trying to get my attention, and I just ignored them. I didn't say anything, didn't look their way, and they followed me, calling me all kinds of names, all kinds of bitches, and all of this. And I was afraid because here I am, and these two men loudly, they didn't try to hide what they were doing, but they were following me in that mall harassing me. And that was the last time I stepped foot in that mall. So for a woman, I have to navigate life with those experiences. And I understand that we can kind of lean too far, but where do we find that balance? How do we raise our young men to respect that a woman walking in a mall, if she's ignoring your advances, that you walk away? You don't follow her and harass her. Or to old men, if there's a 7-year-old child in your presence, you definitely don't pull out your genitalia and expose it to her. Um,
So let me tell you, here's some nuance, and this I hope we can really get through this nuance for those that are listening. This is some big nuance what we're talking about right here. So I'm gonna tell you one of the places that's missing as far as bridging the gap for the scenarios you just laid out, but what makes it difficult to bridge the gap for, as you know, I at least I'm always trying my best to champion for our sisters. I mean, as best I can. I'm not saying I always do it correctly, but it's definitely in my heart to do. And so here's some major nuance to what you're just the examples you just gave. So there's not any decent brother that would have act like what you those two scenarios are okay, right? Like we understand that. Like a brother who would never cuss you out because you whatever, they would never, and obviously going as far as to expose themselves to a young child. So here's the nuance. When we're talking about how to deal with those scenarios, here's the hard part. Generally speaking, as we hang around people who are like ourselves, the good brothers are really typically, for the most part, not around when you're having those experiences. For one, we
mhm.
have a we have a because of how we have culturally kept things under the rug, it becomes natural to a certain extent not to share. Like you already at a young age knew kind of not to tell. We we don't want that situation. We don't want to like we have to figure out how do we make it so that our children will tell, right? We got to figure out how to even make that happen, right? But
Right.
here's something that I've seen growing up in the South, that one of the things with keeping things under the rug, whether it be child molestation or rape, things of that nature, one thing that I've seen relatively consistent is this thing right here. Because we have this culture of not putting things out publicly, we don't want to put a bad name on the family. What I've seen happen way too often is the men in the family that would handle it, they jump through hoops to make sure those men never find out. There
Yep.
are husbands right now that the mother knows what happened to their daughter, but the husband has never heard it his entire life.
Women are complicit in it. We are.
I'm not even trying to make it a woman thing as much as the next. Let me take it one more step. Here's the other step. So, if what I am saying is somewhat a reality, when you and a group of women say come to the type of brothers that would handle that, our answer typically is always, why don't you tell us? I'm not blaming right now. I'm not pointing. I just want to I want to explain the dynamic of why we have trouble protecting you. Not simply because you're not telling us. What I'm saying is, when you point out the men who I would never be around, that would do these things I would never agree to, if I could help sisters to understand how much these two groups are not interacting. You know, because what y'all say was, you got to teach boys. Well, the men in my circle, they teaching men how to be like them. Then you
But
can see what I'm saying? Like we
right,
don't,
I get it.
we don't.
But unfortunately, there
And
are
I'm
not
not trying
enough
to take us
men.
off the hook. I'm just saying I don't know what the go ahead,
Right.
jump in, please.
But it's not enough men. It's more boys that are not being taught than there are
Absolutely,
boys that are being taught. And
I
that's
agree
where the
100% with
discord
that.
begins. And to respond to the when I made the statement that women are complicit, that's because I read a report, me and my
Yeah,
reports,
yeah, absolutely,
that women will not tell on a family member or a close family friend because they are afraid of how they will be inequitably prosecuted in the legal system. And so as a result, they just keep a
real
watchful
talk.
eye, but they allow this predator to run free. We are complicit. And this is why we have to fight those inequities. Perhaps if we begin to fight those inequities of unreasonable punishment, but I really can't imagine any unreasonable punishment for molesting a child,
Right,
except no punishment. So that's the inequity that exist so that we can feel free and comfortable to send the criminals and the predators where they belong. And we need to start telling. And a lot of times we don't tell, perhaps because we know that if a dad or a brother or a cousin knew, what would he do? And so,
exactly,
because we have to be concerned about that. I was a young lady that I used to mentor had the same issue, and her relative went after the person who violated her. And her
absolutely,
concern was once she wasn't there to protect him, that he would go after him again and kill him and then wind up having to go to jail for murder. So there is that very real problem.
absolutely. And so, what I am describing is a gap that we almost can't talk about this gap. We can't talk. What I'm saying, can't talk about it. What I'm saying is, when you, like you said it perfect, when you said there are more boys who are not learning than are. Well, for all of us, like I'm signing up to become a big brother. I do after school counseling. So a lot of the good brothers are doing as much as they can, but the reality is what is being expected for, and it's gonna sound like I'm letting men off the hook, but what's being expected of the best brothers, we don't really realize how it's almost impossible if 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 you're not going to tell us, knowing that we're going to handle our business. And because I know that's in me. I don't have children yet, but I couldn't. I admit. I mean, a lot of men say it. I'm going to jail. You touch my daughter, I'm going to jail. You touch my wife, I'm going to jail. And so, because of that, women protect us. Women protect us. So what happened? And we love you for it. But in you protecting us, it ties our hand on helping you. My best friend when I was young, we found out after her husband abandoned her that he had been abusing her for a lot of years. We never saw it. We never knew. And I know for a fact, not me, I was young. But she knew for a fact her brothers was those type of guys. So she made sure her brothers never knew.
Right.
She definitely had those type brothers that without question, they'd have did life for her over no had they known.
Right.
And so this is I'm exposing a real life when sisters are saying you stand up. Well, typically the best brothers don't find out. Now I will say I found this out, and we can get off after this. This hurt me to the heart. I found out recently over the past so many months, a young sister saying there was a situation and the church leaders even knew about it and let it be. Like that devastated me. Because as I'm sitting here explaining to her, my circle of men would never do that. You know what I mean? And she was even privy to a circle of men that she knew would protect her, but not where she's at now. You understand what I'm saying? And
Right.
so when she tells me that these church leaders were aware and didn't get involved, that's not something I've understood. I'll give one last example. I ran in a circle of brothers that this scenario happened in college. We were the young bros and the older bros. You know, we found out of it. The sister didn't take it forward to the authorities like it probably should have been, but she brought it to us. The older cat said, "We got this." You know what we got this was? They got the dude kicked out of school. Like made like put some bullshit together to get him kicked out of school. Like that's how serious they were. Like they made it up. So I run in circle of men like that.
Right.
So I'm sitting here thinking, so the circle of good men, we got this. So when I hear this young sister story telling me that there are men who are complicit, who present themselves as I got you, I don't know what to do with that because I don't know a circle of men who would not protect you. But I am aggravated with men who, in this scenario with Bill Cosby, will argue you down about what why did they wait so long without understanding or listening to what y'all go through. So I'm done. I just wanted to. I don't have an answer in that, but it is a real life dilemma, in my opinion, that from what I can tell, most good men are not made aware of how they can protect you. Do you think you have an answer in how me as a good brother? I mean, trust me, I'm trying to beat up the guys that don't want to listen, but I typically don't run with it. So what do you think we can do? My big answer is always, we got to make sure we figured out who the parent of our child is and stay with that person so they'll teach. Because while you out here on your own, it's hard for us to mentor all these young brothers and young sisters, even trying to be mentored. That's so it's a struggle for me. But what can we
I
do
totally get
to do better?
it. I think that there needs to be, like you said, there needs to be we need to get our significant other and ensure that that's the one. And it's the pot calling the kettle black because I'm divorced. But we need to make certain that we are being intimate with people that we want to build with, and not one night stands, and not that we need to, and we can talk about the families, or family is going, traditional nuclear family is going away across the board. That's community. We can't compare ourselves to other communities because we're at the back of this playing field. So we need our families intact, not just for, the emotional and the mental support that our children need, but when you think about financially, if I got kids over here with Jane, and I got kids over here with Diane, and then I got two more with my wife, that means that the money that I bring home is being spread across three households. So we're
That's
not
not good
getting that
support.
economic
Yeah, that's not
empowerment
good
that we
support.
need either.
That's not economic
And
support.
so Right. And so we need to build our family structure. We need to get back to the village raising us. Um, we've gotten away from all of that, and those old fashioned values. And when you and I first met, I wasn't here, but those old fashioned values mean something. And since they've gone away, we don't have anything. I think you brought to my attention about the Kendrick Lamar song where he talked about he'd been to funerals, but he'd never been to a
Wallet,
wedding.
wallet.
Our young men don't know what love looks like. They don't know how to treat a woman because they've never seen their mothers get treated well, or they don't know what that means. And so we're raising a generation of young men who don't know what it means to love a woman, to love their family, and be there all in. So we got to fix that.
Right. And the last thing I'll leave the brothers with is, while we're young and immature and coercing our sisters out here into being with us sexually, um, we're immature so long, unfortunately, to the extent that we forgive or allow some things that are basically does not the proper respect to our women. We kind of have to grow out of that. Well, we never think about while we're growing out of that what our women are faced with often. while you may not be the brother that will transgress scripture, uh, while you're in that world and guys are looking at obvious things of that nature, she might be in the hands of some brother who will go further than you. So we actually, to a certain extent, in our immaturity, without having our fathers teaching us better, to a certain extent, in our own immaturity, we condone some of the behaviors of these men that may not be in our circle just because we're spending time looking at our sisters as objects. Again, I'm 45, didn't notice at 15. So it's just throwing some things out. I'm not gonna belabor this piece or whatever, but we'll share it with people, that kind of thing. I just hope we talked about some things that needed to be talked about. Thank you for doing this with us.
Bye.
All right, everybody. Saturday morning, Mental Dialogue Talk Show, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're doing an amazing show on why are we behind in STEM and what can we do to fix it. So look forward to that on Saturday morning. You can go to the Facebook page, the Mental Dialogue Facebook page. They'll be playing there. And go to my Facebook page right now. And I got a piece that lays out some of the facts in the Bill Cosby case and just talks about some of what we talked about today a little more deeper. And it's called Black Socrates Speaks, Bill Cosby, Icon of Rapist. So look that piece up as well. All right. James is laughing at us. All right, we out, Queen.
All right. Bye.
All right, good stuff.